In this session, I want to give you an introduction to economics. In fact, we've got several classes on this topic. Economics is a big subject area, it's a very important subject area, so it justifies having several classes on it. But this is a brief introduction, so just to get us started. Let's move to, for a start, the idea of wants and the origin of wants. We want things. We want food. We want clothing. We want shelter. These are the basics. We also want entertainment and holidays, and we want a good life. We have lots of wants in our life. For those of you doing the business course, you may encounter Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's a good way of looking at this structure of wants. And I'll talk about this more in seminars at a later stage and look at the integration of Maslow with this idea of wants. But it's the wants that drive our behavior. Wants determine what we work at and how much we work and how dedicated we are to working, because it's through work and effort we get the rewards, and the rewards are the wants, the satisfaction of the wants. We get money, let's say in terms of wages and salaries, and we use the money to purchase the things that give us satisfaction, that address our wants. So what are the origins of wants? Well, the origins are really in our heads. It's psychological. Wants can be put there through advertising. Companies may get us to desire products, perhaps demand products that we haven't even thought about, but now become important to us because exposure to the advertisements and to the promotions means we want these things. It could be anything from a different car to a different house to a holiday somewhere to what we wear, our clothing, what we eat, where we eat, and it covers a whole range of everything we do. So the wants reside in our heads, and the producers and the manufacturers and the promoters and the marketing personnel and the advertising personnel, they're trying to influence our wants by getting us to desire this product or that particular lifestyle. The satisfaction of our biological and cultural needs require a whole range of goods. Because we are complicated people, we don't just want food. We want food, and as soon as our food and our essentials are met, our security and a place to live, and as soon as we've got those, our wants carry on. We want the next layer. We want not just food, we want nicer food, and we want a nicer place to live. And once we've got that, we need a car, and we need not just a car, we need a bigger car, and then we need a holiday. Not just any holiday, we need a big holiday. Our wants just carry on. And we could see that as partially biological, because that's the way we're programmed as creatures of the earth. It's also cultural. We get it off our friends and our family. We see where our friends are living, and we want to live the same. So we have wants that are based on other people's behaviour. And our tastes change over time. They're not the same. We evolve over time. We become more sophisticated. We learn more. We observe the world more. And what we want may change over time. There are constantly changing fashions, for example, and trends in society. The way we live and what we wear, where we go on holidays, what we eat. There's a lot of change in the society, and we're constantly moving with that. So our wants are constantly in front of us all the time. We never seem to satisfy all of our wants. We always want something else. And to some extent, it's the function of the advertising and marketing industries to keep us like that. If we were all satisfied with what we've got, then perhaps we wouldn't shop. And if we don't shop, there won't be businesses and there won't be employment. And perhaps the country will be a lot worse off. That's an argument in what we call macroeconomics, a topic we'll be coming to later. The pressures to conform may be related to the influence of the advertising industry, as I've just said. So we have to bear in mind the success or failure of the advertising industry to influence us will determine the future of the businesses, but it'll also determine the way we live and the way we structure our lives. The satisfaction of some wants may generate new wants. For example, if you purchase a house, you'll probably want to purchase some furniture. If you purchase a car, you're going to have to purchase the energy to drive the car. If you purchase a car, you're going to require 4 wheels perhaps, and they need tires or they need maintenance. So we have a whole set of requirements that come with a single purchase. So they're not just cultural in the sense that we wanted to keep up with our neighbours, but we wanted also because it is enforced by the nature of the product. The product requires certain sub-products or sub-qualities that we have to ensure are there. So these things help to determine our demand. Now, the one problem we've got in all of this is scarcity. We don't have enough money. We never have enough money, it seems to be. There are some people on the planet who seem to have billions and billions, and perhaps they've got enough money, although they seem to act like they want even more. But we suffer from scarcity, and that's a topic that we have to address more fully throughout the course, because it's scarcity that determines value. The value of a product is a reflection of the scarcity of that product and what we're willing to pay for it. Generally speaking, resources are scarce relative to our wants. When resources are scarce, we must pay for their production. So we have to pay to get them, but also they're scarce, and perhaps the raw materials and the resources going into the products are scarce. So it's scarcity that determines the value in the market. And in general, the scarcer an object is relative to customer demand, the more expensive it will be. So we would expect a glass of water in a city to be relatively cheap. But a glass of water in the middle of the desert, that might be expensive. Diamonds are very scarce relative to want, and therefore very expensive. So if someone asks you for a glass of water, if you're living in a city and someone asks you for a glass of water, you probably give it to them. It's free. Just a glass of water. But if the same person asked you for your diamonds, if you've got some, you won't give them the diamonds. Diamonds are expensive. We'll see later that in other classes that all of the value of items is a reflection of the scarcity of those items relative to want, relative to what people want. So people want diamonds. People who live in cities want diamonds because they can adorn themselves with diamonds and look wonderful because they're wearing diamonds. But diamonds are scarce. So diamonds are expensive. And maybe they're demanding diamonds because they are expensive, because they want to show off to the world that they can afford diamonds. Whatever the motivation, diamonds are expensive. They're scarce. If diamonds were very commonplace. If you could go into the garden and just dig up diamonds, loads of diamonds, diamonds would not have the same image or reputation or same value in our society. They would just be diamonds. In fact, we'd probably be sweeping them up and putting them in the bin to be taken away by the refuge collectors. So diamonds are scarce, they're expensive. And the same applies for every product. And the price we pay for it is a reflection of how scarce it is. Now, the means to satisfy our wants, we do this through production. We may do it through discovery, going out looking for something. That's a type of production. But we have to, generally speaking, we have to produce the things. And that has to be paid for as well. Now, choice. Well, if you go back to the Robbins definition, that's the Robbins definition we've got on the screen at the moment. It's a science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. Alternative uses. We have to make choices. We always have to make choices. When you go to the shop, you go to buy some bread. What sort of bread? We have to make a choice. And what determines it? Well, our tastes, our wants, the price, our incomes. There are many factors that we weigh up straight away. As soon as we go to the shop, we're just going to buy some bread, and yet we have to make these very complicated choices. Of course, we don't normally think we're making these choices, but we are. We're assessing the amount of satisfaction we're going to get from the bread by exchanging that certain amount of money. And that money could have been used to buy something else. So there is, in economics, what we call an opportunity cost. That's a term we'll look into in later classes. A very important term, but please note it for the moment. Opportunity cost. Sometimes when we buy bread, we have to give up something else because we can't afford perhaps the bread and something else. So we have to make choices. So that's the Robbins definition. We're looking at alternative uses, and that introduces the problem of choice. Now, choice poses three fundamental questions. What goods and services should be produced? Well, the market helps us to answer this. So the goods and services that will be produced will be the ones that lead to the greatest rewards for the producers. But that means that the purchasers have to be prepared to pay what the producers want. If the purchasers are not willing to pay it and the producers make it, they will lose. So the producers have to guess what the purchasers will pay. If they guess that wrongly, they will make a loss. If they guess it correctly, they will make a profit. And we'll see how that works in later classes. The next one is, how should the goods and services be produced? What technology should be brought to bear on it? Where should it be produced? How should it be produced? How should it be structured? All of these decisions go into making the product, which will eventually be sold at a certain price, let's say in a shop. And the customer will decide if that price is correct for that customer, i.e., they will buy it or they will not buy it at that price. And that's what the producer has to bear in mind. Lastly, in this section, they have to decide for whom the goods and services will be produced. Well, they're going to be produced presumably for the consumer, but which consumers? Uh, Consumers are not the same. There are different markets. There is a very expensive market for people with lots of money. There are not so expensive markets for the median income earners. And there are goods and services for people who don't have a lot of money. So they have to work out which market are they operating in. So we've got three fundamental questions here. What goods and services should be produced? How should they be produced? And for whom should they be produced? Three fundamental questions that the market answers. Now, the classification of economic theory. Well, the first classification we hit is microeconomics. Now, this studies individual economic agents. So, for example, the consumer, the producer. You'll note here I'm speaking in the singular. The consumer, the producer, the firm, the business unit. We're talking about a particular product, not products. It's micro. It's individual economic agents. It's individual products. It's individual markets. It's micro. It's small. It's focused. It's directed at single economic agents, single markets, single producers. These are all micro issues. So it's concerned with individual markets, consumers, firms, and industries, and related topics. Individual. The word here is individual. And that's very important in the context of microeconomics. Remember the word microeconomics, and then remember the word individual, because that's what it is. Macroeconomics is the other type of economics that economists are concerned with. And this deals with aggregates. This deals with totalities. It's concerned with such topics as aggregate investment, the balance of payments, the rate of inflation, unemployment, economic growth and decline, consumption expenditure, the rate of interest, the money supply and demand, government expenditure and taxation. There's probably more, and I've probably missed it. But what you'll see from that list is these are all aggregate terms. We're not talking about the investment in one company. We're talking about all of the investment in the country, in the economy. All the companies, all the businesses in the country, how much are they investing? It's an aggregate concept. And this is the type of economics that's discussed on television nearly every day. In the news, if you look at the news, they come to the financial report and they'll talk about the economy, they'll talk about the rate of interest. They don't talk about the rate of interest for cars or the rate of interest in a certain area or a certain town or a certain bank. They talk about the rate of interest. It's an aggregate term. We talk about the money supply. The government talks about the money supply, controlling the money supply and looking after the money supply. The money supply is an aggregate term. It's all of the money supply. Government expenditure is an aggregate term. It's all the different areas that the government spends on. So aggregate. Macro is aggregate. It's total. Micro, individual. Go back to the slide on micro for a second. Where's micro gone to? Sorry, there it is. Micro studies economic activity of individual economic agents, individuals, whereas macro is aggregates. These are all aggregate terms. Now we know the difference. Two types of economics, micro and macro. Next, welfare. The outcome of economic activity is welfare. When the government changes economic policy, some groups of people will benefit and others may suffer. Now, what we have to do is try to work out ways in which there is a net benefit in the country. and that the people who suffer don't suffer too much, and the people who gain a lot. But of course, that's the art of politics, and that's what you see discussed on television or on the radio all the time. This is where the government and the opposition in the country, they fight and argue, and this is what they're dealing with. They're trying to work out ways to meet their objectives without hurting anyone. But in truth, they have to take away from the workers and from the people in the country. They have to take away money and resources in the form of taxation. Now, there is one way of appraising this, of looking at this to see how it works. And this is put forward by an Italian economist called Vilfredo Pareto. And we'll just look here at what's known as a Pareto improvement, and we'll see how this one works. It's said to exist when a policy change, when the government changes something, can increase the welfare of one person without decreasing the welfare of someone else. That's an improvement. So if the government's going to do something, and if it can show that at least one person is better off and nobody is worse off, then that's an improvement. So that's the argument. We can now judge the government. We can judge the arguments. We can say, is this policy Pareto efficient? Will someone be made better off without hurting someone else? And if the answer to that unambiguously is yes, someone can be made better off and no one is going to be hurt, then that's a good idea. That's a good policy. But in truth, nearly all policies will make someone better off but make someone else worse off. Usually it's the case the government wants to help someone who needs it, perhaps someone on very low income, but they have to tax people on very high incomes. Now you could say, well, that's fair, but the people on very high incomes are losing. And according to the Pareto principle, no one should lose. If someone can be made better off without hurting someone else, that's a Pareto improvement. Excuse me. Now, Pareto optimum. Well, a Pareto optimum exists when we cannot improve the welfare of one person without making someone else worse off. That's when we're at the optimum. When the country is in a state where the government's spending on different goods and services, it's taxing people, and it's all settled down. Now, if it tries to improve someone or some group, improve their lot, improve industry, or improve some sector of industry by cutting taxes to them, let's say, who's going to finance that tax cut? Someone else is going to have to pay more. If that's the case, it's not a Pareto optimum. But if you're able to help someone without making someone else worse off, that's a Pareto efficient move, we've just discussed. Now, if we get to the stage where we've helped lots of people and no one's been made worse off, now we want to help one more group, but we can't, because if we now take resources from a different group to help them, we're going to make that group worse off. If we have hit that stage, that's called a Pareto optimum. No one can be made better off without hurting someone else. That's Pareto optimality. So, this is a topic we're going to return to as well. We'll talk about it in the course of our studies. But for the moment, try and do a little research on this one as well, and we'll pick it up in classes and go across it again. But for the moment, that introduces Pareto efficiency and Pareto optimality, as well as the classification of economics that we talked about earlier. So let's leave it there and say thank you for watching.